Hi everyone, my name is Vanman, and today we're on a quest to see how fast we can beat Pokemon Red and Blue with just a Jolteon. As usual, the full rule set for this run is in the description below, but in summary, I can only use Jolteon in battle with no battle items, I can't use any glitches or RNG manipulation, I must save before boss battles and then reset if I lose, and finally, Jolteon's placement in the tier ranking will be determined by its real-world time spent completing the game while playing at 4 times speed. Of all the evolutions, Jolteon has always been my favorite. In addition to Electric being my favorite type in the game, Jolteon's sleek, angular design just looks so menacing in comparison to Flareon or Vaporeon, like it's always ready to pounce at any moment. But it's not just about the aesthetic appeal, because Jolteon is also a fantastic Pokemon for solo playthroughs, in no small part because of its excellent base stat total of a whopping 430. And speaking of, the way the evolutions work in Gen 1 is that all 3 of them have the exact same stats across the board, with the exception that each Pokemon has one of its stats buffed up by a full 2-fold. That stat being Attack in the case of Flareon, HP in the case of Vaporeon, and Speed in the case of Jolteon, which bodes very well for Jolteon because, as longtime viewers of this channel will know, consistently outspeeding your opponent is one of the surest ways to succeed in a solo challenge run such as this one. And indeed, Jolteon is tied with the likes of Aerodactyl and Mewtwo for the second highest speed stat in the entire game, trailing behind only Electrode, who was the fastest. But it doesn't end there, because not only will Jolteon's enormous speed allow it to move with priority against its opponents, but in Gen 1, base speed also determines a Pokemon's critical hit ratio, leaving Jolteon landing a critical hit an astounding 25% of the time. And by the way, don't you find it fascinating how back in the early days, a Pokemon's typing so strongly predicted its stats? For example, Psychic types always have really good special, for Rock types it's all about defense, and they made all the Electric types really fast. I honestly think it's because they were trying to make Electric type Pokemon reminiscent of the Flash, who is also my favorite DC hero by the way. So, how will Jolteon handle running through the entire game all by itself? Only one way to find out. Everyone make your predictions in the comments now, as well as hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on those notifications, and let's dive into our attempt to beat Pokemon Red and Blue with just a Jolteon. To begin the run, we have to make use of the Universal Pokemon Randomizer to change our Bulbasaur starter to Jolteon, causing the rival to choose Charmander. To kick off the first rival battle, since Jolteon begins the game with the same type attack bonus move in the form of Thundershock, we have no problem taking down the rival's Charmander in a few hits, after which we make our way through Route 1 in Viridian Forest, utilizing Jolteon's impressive 110 special to one-shot all the wild encounters with Thundershock, and two-shot all the Pokemon on the Bugcatcher's teams for experience, allowing us to make it to Pewter City in a mere 2 minutes and 35 seconds. However, as quickly as we've been progressing through the game so far, up next is one of Jolteon's first major hurdles in the form of Brock, because obviously his Pokemon's ground typing make them immune to Jolteon's Thundershock, and their rock typing means that they resist our other 2 attacking moves of Tackle and Quick Attack. Not to mention Jolteon's attack stat is a lot more mediocre than its other stats. However, I still believe Jolteon will be able to make it past Brock sooner than you might think, because we do have Sand Attack to mitigate the opponent's tackles, and we can rely on Jolteon's high critical hit ratio to deal more damage than usual. So my plan is to go in at level 10 to see if that will earn us the victory. And to do that, since we're currently at level 9, I faced a junior trainer in the Pewter Gym, which should provide us just enough experience to level us up. So the trainer leads with Diglett, and because Thundershock would be ineffective, we just spam Quick Attack, and Diglett goes down in 3 hits, after bringing us down to about 2/3 health with a couple scratches. Then against Sandshrew we go for Quick Attack, and due to Sandshrew having much higher defense than Diglett, it looks to be doing about a 6th. Then Sandshrew goes for Scratch, and after a long exchange of scratches and quick attacks, Sandshrew lands Sand Attack to lower our accuracy, preventing us from landing the finishing blow, and for the first time in the history of this channel, we unintentionally lose to the junior trainer. And now, I'm pretty sure at this point I just had a giant chip on my shoulder, because although we did meet our goal of reaching level 10, I head back to the junior trainer just to prove a point. And although we get past the Diglett again no problem, this time Sandshrew opens with Sand Attack, and we deal even less damage to the Sandshrew before it knocks us out yet again. So of course we head back to try a 3rd time, and this time we go for Quick Attack, and it goes for Scratch. Okay good, no Sand Attack so far. Then another Quick Attack, and yep, there's the Sand Attack. But our next Quick Attack lands good, then it uses Scratch, but then our next Quick Attack misses, it goes for Scratch, and although our next Quick Attack hits, Sandshrew finally lands another Sand Attack, followed by yet another Sand Attack a couple turns later, meaning we come just 1 Quick Attack shy of knocking out the Sandshrew before it does the same to us. And after this 3rd loss, that got me thinking about why exactly it is that Sand Attack is always so frustrating to play against. And I think the psychological reason is that the first Sand Attack leaves you with just a sliver of hope. Like, it's only one sand attack, maybe I still have a chance. But then the first sand attack makes it more likely that the opponent will use a second sand attack, which in turn makes it more likely that they'll use a third sand attack, and so on down the line. So the end result is just this tumbling cascade of misfortune that you feel like it's impossible to escape from, as your odds of winning steadily plummet to 0. But you know what? As much as I'd like to show this Sandshrew who's boss, the clock is ticking, and we still haven't even attempted Brock, despite being one level higher than I originally intended. So now we just abandon the junior trainer altogether and face Brock at level 11. So to start, in an act of total hypocrisy, now it's our turn to abuse the sand attack tactics, because our plan is to use the full 6 sand attacks to drop Geodude's accuracy as low as possible, and then spam either tackle or quick attack until it goes down. So after our sand attack setup is complete, we begin attacking, but as predicted, each strike is only dealing a blip, and with the attacks dealing such little damage, even the critical hits don't make that much of a difference. But still, even though it took 25 attacks, a full 9 of which were critical hits, to get the job done, we still take out the Geodude while it managed to get in 3 attacks of its own before going down, bringing us to just over half health. Then against Onix, our strategy is exactly the same as it was for Geodude, which is open with 6 sand attacks and then whittle it away while hoping that it continues to miss, with the exception that when it goes for Bide, we switch to a non-damaging move in the form of either Sand Attack or Thunder Shock to prevent any damage in the retaliation turn. And in case you were wondering, yes, Bide actually bypasses accuracy checks and will always hit even after Sand Attack. So no, we can't just continue attacking through the Bide in the hopes that Bide will miss. And as we continue watching this tiny dog slam itself into a giant rock, I also want to note something else that you might not have thought of unless you've done these challenges yourself, which is that in the emulator I use, there's an auto fire function that allows you to hold down a single button on your controller, and the game will spam that button over and over again for you. A very useful feature in a game like Pokemon, where you're often selecting the same attack again and again. But in this fight against Onix, that unironically adds yet another layer of difficulty, because if you're just spamming the same attack, a lot of times the text on the screen will scroll by so fast that your eyes miss when Onix uses Bide, and you actually attack into it. And other times your eyes miss when Onix's Bide is over, and accidentally fail to resume attacking. Granted, in this battle I don't think it would have mattered either way, because while Onix is still in the yellow, it lands a Screech to lower our defense, followed by a tackle for the knockout. And what's more, this Brock battle is extremely time consuming, with that first attempt lasting an entire minute and a half. So if we continue to lose, that's really going to put a huge dent in Jolteon's final score. But it turns out that we do indeed make it past Brock on the second attempt, using the exact same strategy as the first time, because although we knock out Geodude and go into Onix at even less health than before, thanks to our sand attacks, Onix never actually hits us a single time, while a long series of tackles and quick attacks slowly chip it away for the knockout, winning us the Boulder Badge. Then after defeating Brock, Jolteon rides its massive speed and special to bulldoze its way past Route 3 in Mount Moon in only 3 minutes, and upon arriving in Cerulean City, most Pokemon would choose to face Rival 2 and then traverse Nugget Bridge, but in Jolteon's case we'll actually have an easier time with Misty thanks to our type advantage. And in the battle, obviously Thunder Shock takes care of Staryu no problem, but Starmie actually poses a real threat. 1, because we are still pretty underleveled, 2, because although Jolteon has excellent special, so does Starmie, and 3, although Electric is super effective against water, Electric doesn't actually resist water. So when we open with Thunder Shock to deal about a third, and Starmie retaliates with Bubble Beam, the Bubble Beam actually deals more damage than the Thunder Shock did to bring us to just over half health. Then because Bubble Beam also got a speed drop, in the next turn Starmie goes first and Water Gun brings us to yellow. Then our Thunder Shock brings Starmie to yellow. Then one more Water Gun brings us to red, after which one final Thunder Shock knocks out the Starmie and wins us the Cascade Badge. So if Starmie had used 2 Bubble Beams in that fight instead of just 1, that obviously would have spelled defeat for us, but here we managed to luck out and win on the first attempt. Then up next, we immediately head to face Rival 2, who is actually more annoying than you might think, because our super effective Thunder Shock is just shy of a one-shot against Pidgeotto, who, in typical Pidgeotto fashion, just has to get in a sand attack. But luckily we spite the accuracy drop on the next turn for the knockout, meaning that in this fight, we've successfully dodged the sand attack cascade that I mentioned earlier. Then, because Abra's defense is so much worse than its special, we spam quick attack rather than Thunder Shock until it goes down. Then Rattata does almost nothing with a quick attack of its own before going down to Thunder Shock. And finally, even though a few of our Thunder Shocks miss, Charmander is still not a threat, and a few turns later, we've defeated the rival. Then, as we trek across Route 25 just after Nugget Bridge, stage, we come across 2 hikers, and to progress through the route, you have to face at least one of them. One of the hikers has an Onix, and the other has a Machop and a Geodude. So for a Pokemon like Jolteon that doesn't have very good options against rock and ground types, these trainers can be a bit of a bump in the road. Well, since Geodude has lower defense than Onix, I decide to face this hiker instead of the other. And while his Machop is one-shot with a critical hit Thundershock, against Geodude we're not so lucky, because in the battle, I figured we're so over-leveled that we don't need to bother with Sand Attack like we did against Brock, and we can just spam Quick Attack instead. But Geodude's tackle is actually dealing some serious damage at 5 HP per attack, and with Geodude also using a few defense curls, its tackles are actually managing to keep pace with our quick attacks until we're both in red health. Then I pause for a moment to consider maybe using Sand Attack here, but instead I decide to use Quick Attack again, and luckily it gets a critical hit for the knockout. Man, talk about a close call. I didn't save before that fight, so if I had lost there, I would have had to reset all the way back to before Rival 2. Then we continue across Route 25 to Bill's house, grab the SS ticket, escape rope back to Cerulean City, then head south through Route 6 to Vermilion. And by the way, on Route 6 there is a last with 3 Pidgeys, all of whom know Sand Attack. And after playing this game so many times with so many different Pokemon, I've learned that most solo Pokemon are terrified of her because they either don't outspeed the Pidgeys or don't one-shot or both, meaning that when fighting this last, you can easily black out to a series of Sand Attacks and tackles. In my Electrode run, for example, despite Electrode being a very similar Pokemon to Jolteon, it took a total of 3 attempts to get past her. But now that we're playing Jolteon, I have to say it feels so good to be able to outspeed and one-shot the Pidgeys without fear of any Sand Attack shenanigans in this run. But anyway, upon making it to the SSN, we head to this room to pick up the TM for Body Slam to replace Tackle, then take on Rival 3. And realistically, for almost every Pokemon in the game, Rival 3 is probably the easiest boss trainer in the entire playthrough, just because his team is so incredibly underleveled. For example, we're 5 points above his Pidgeotto, 8 points above his Raticate, 7 points above Kadabra, and 5 points above Charmeleon, all of whom we sweep past with ease and finish the battle in the green. Then after defeating the rival, we head over to the Vermilion Gym to face Lieutenant Surge, and this battle for Jolteon goes just as smoothly as the rival did, because Voltorb is 2-shot with Body Slam, with Voltorb getting off a tackle that does almost nothing. Then Pikachu leads with Quick Attack before being 1-shot with Body Slam. Then our first Body Slam against Raichu deals about half and also paralyzes. Then Surge goes for X speed, but thanks to the paralysis we still outspeed on the next turn and knock it out, winning us the Thunder Badge. And here, you might be wondering how it was possible that the Raichu became paralyzed when Raichu is an electric type Pokemon, because aren't electric types immune to paralysis? Well, that's true in modern Pokemon, but in Gen 1 it's different. The way it works here is that Pokemon can't be inflicted with a status condition from a damaging move that shares their type. So Raichu couldn't be paralyzed with Thunder Wave, for example, but since Body Slam is a normal move, it's fair game. And if we were battling, let's say, a Coughing, Toxic couldn't inflict it with Poison, but Twin Needle could, and so on. But regardless, upon Lieutenant Surge's defeat, he gifts us with one of the most powerful teams in the game, Thunderbolt, which we immediately teach to Jolteon, replacing Thundershock. And by the way, a little bit of story time for you. When I was a kid, my first ever Pokemon game was Pokemon Yellow, and whenever my Pikachu reached level 26 and learned Thunderbolt, I never replaced Thundershock because I didn't understand the concept of one move being more powerful than another. And since Pikachu is an electric type Pokemon, I thought it was Pikachu's sole purpose to use as many different electric type moves as possible. So when I eventually made it to the Elite Four for the first time, my Pikachu's moveset was Thundershock, Thunderbolt, Thunder Wave, and Thunder. Not exactly the most inspired strategy, but hey, we take what we can get. So back to the run. Up next, we use the likes of Thunderbolt and Body Slam to sweep our way through Route 9 in Rock Tunnel, and then while in Rock Tunnel, we also come across the infamous self-destructing hiker with 2 Geodudes and a Graveler. And although you might think this trainer would be a stumbling block just like Brock in the Route 25 hiker, the simple fact that all 3 of this trainer's Pokemon know self-destruct make this battle entirely trivial, because all we have to do is spam Sand Attack to drop their accuracy and just patiently wait for all 3 of his Pokemon to blow up in vain, allowing us to exit the cave in painless fashion and make it to Celadon City at just over 27 minutes. Then upon arriving in Celadon, we head to the department store where, in addition to our usual shopping errands, we also pick up the TM for Reflect in preparation for a few battles later down the line. Then we pick up the HM for Fly, then fly back to Lavender Town to face Rival 4. And this fight is the first boss battle of the run where electric type Pokemon really shine, because not only is it the first boss battle where electric Pokemon have access to Thunderbolt, but the rival also has Pidgeotto and Gyarados on his team who are weak to electric electric attacks. So to kick off the battle, Pidgeotto was obviously outsped in one-shot with Thunderbolt, then although Execute resists Thunderbolt, it's still a two-shot. Then as expected Gyarados goes down, then Kadabra's defense is so weak that it goes down to a single body slam, and finally Charmeleon is one-shot with Thunderbolt as well. Then after defeating the rival, we traverse Cycling Road to complete the Safari Zone mission, and then head immediately to the Fuchsia Gym to face Koga. And you might notice that this is the first battle of the run in which we're substantially underleveled. So our victory here is by no means certain like it was in so many of the other battles leading up to this point. To start against the first Coughing, our plan is to open with Reflect to brace the opponent's attacks, especially the Weezing Self Destruct, and then just spam Thunderbolt, all the while hoping they don't disrupt our game plan with Smokescreen, which by the way does exactly the same thing as Sand Attack. So using this strategy, we use Reflect, after which Coughing uses an X attack, and then Thunderbolt comes just shy of a one-shot. Then Coughing does very little with Smog before going down in the next turn. Okay, good. That means we go into Muck with our accuracy completely intact. Against Muck, Thunderbolt deals about half, and then Koga uses an X attack, and our next Thunderbolt gets the knockout. Then luckily the second Coughing is one shot with a critical hit Thunderbolt, meaning that we go into Weezing having been hit with 0 smoke screens. So we go for Thunderbolt, it crits to bring Weezing to red, then Koga goes for yet another X attack, and then one more Thunderbolt gets the job done, winning us the Soul Badge in decisive fashion. And now that we've defeated Koga, that allows us to use Surf in the overworld outside of battle, but as soon as that happened, my mind had to do a double take, because at the time of playing this run, I had just recently finished competing in a community race hosted by Scott's Thoughts to see who could beat Pokemon Yellow the fastest with just a Parasect. And in Pokemon Yellow, the player is gifted with a free Squirtle in Vermilion City that can surf as soon as you defeat Koga. But in Pokemon Red and Blue, you don't actually get a Pokemon that can learn surf until after defeating Rival 5. So with Pokemon Yellow still on the mind, I accidentally flew to Pallet Town to try to surf to Cinnabar Island, but then immediately realized that we actually have to head to Silphco to defeat Rival 5 first. And as we make our way over to Silphco, this next battle demands an explanation for why I had the rival choose Charmander as his starter Pokemon, and the reason is that the rival starter also informs which other Pokemon he will carry with him on his team for the remainder of the playthrough. So if, for example, I have the rival choose Charmander, that will mean that his teams in the Rival 5, Rival 6, and Champion battles will have a full 3 Pokemon that are weak to electric attacks in the form of Pidgeot, Gyarados, and Charizard, as opposed to only 2 Pokemon weak to electric attacks if the rival had chosen either Squirtle or Bulbasaur. And on this channel, we're only going for speed, so I always make the rival choose the starter that will be easiest, not hardest. However, making the rival choose Charmander in a Jolteon run does come at a cost, because that also leaves him with Execute on his team, and since Execute resists Thunderbolt, that leaves it with ample opportunity to inflict paralysis with Stun Spore and sap your health with Leech Seed. And indeed in this fight, although Pidgeot obviously goes down to a single Thunderbolt, the initial Thunderbolt on Execute only does about a third, but then luckily Execute goes for Poison Powder instead of Stun Spore, and not only that, but the Poison Powder misses. Then the next Thunderbolt brings Execute to yellow, then we again successfully dodge Stun Spore because it again uses Poison Powder which lands this time. However, we're still not in any danger of Poison Powder doing anything meaningful because in Gen 1 you don't actually take any poison damage on the same turn that you knock out an opposing Pokemon. And after Execute goes down on the next turn, Thunderbolt takes out Gyarados, and then Body Slam does half to Alakazam, who then just uses Disable and Sand Attack before another Body Slam takes it out. And then finally Charizard stands no chance against a super effective Thunderbolt, and it goes down for a first try victory. Then after defeating the rival, we head to face against Giovanni and Sylph. And although I don't always show this particular fight, it's actually pretty relevant here because Giovanni has a Rhyhorn on his team. And against Rhyhorn, I really don't think Body Slam is going to do the trick. Fortunately though, Jolteon does learn Double Kick at level 42, only 4 levels higher than we are right now, so I decide to use a few rare candies. But first, I check Jolteon's experience and see that we're only 904 experience to the next level. So I head back through Silphco to defeat one more trainer to get us to level 39, then use 3 rare candies to get us to level 42, and learn Double Kick replacing Sand Attack. To start the battle against Giovanni, we set up Reflect against Nidorino, and then one-shot it with Thunderbolt, then one-shot Kangaskhan with Thunderbolt, then two-shot Rhyhorn with the super effective Double Kick, and then since Nidoqueen resists Double Kick, we just spam Body Slam. And even though it takes a full 4 hits to take down the Nidoqueen, its moves are so unthreatening that we're never in any danger of losing, and we finish the battle in the green. Then, after completing the Silphco mission, now that we have Lapras, we can surf down to Cinnabar Island. But first, we make a pit pit stop at all these trainers in the ocean to gain some experience. Because for most Pokemon, it tends to be very beneficial to preemptively train up just a little bit to make the Elite Four more consistent. And for most Pokemon, the most efficient place to do that is in one of the later Pokemon gyms, since the trainers are all right next to each other and you can gain lots of experience very quickly. However, in the case of Jolteon, this route from Pallet Town to Cinnabar is the best place to do it because of our type advantage against all the water types. So then, as we wrap up our training and make it to Cinnabar where we take on Blaine, this fight would normally be extremely easy, except that I actually forgot to restore our Thunderbolt power points, and we go into the battle with only 3 left. But instead of resetting, I just attempted to battle anyway. So to start, we set up Reflect to mitigate any stomps or takedowns coming our way later down the line, after which Thunderbolt one-shots both Growlithe and Ponyta. Then Thunderbolt brings Rapidash down to red, after which it just fails a Tail Whip and then goes down to a Double Kick. And now against Arcanine, since during our training just earlier we replaced Body Slam with Agility, and because we have no more Thunderbolt power points, we're relegated to just spamming Double Kick, which obviously isn't as clean an answer as Thunderbolt would be, but we still managed to take it out without a hitch, winning us the Volcano badge. Then after defeating Blaine, we head to the Saffron Gym to face Sabrina. And before I show you this fight, let's talk about the strategy here, because remember how just earlier during our training session we learned Agility? Well, against Sabrina that's very relevant, because although Jolteon is already extremely fast and therefore doesn't need the speed boost from Agility, we can also use Agility to abuse the badge boost glitch, which really shouldn't be called a glitch because it's unavoidable, but in any case, the way the badge boost glitch works is that every odd-numbered badge grants a permanent 12.5% boost to a particular stat. But in Gen 1, anytime your stats are modified in battle, such as with Agility, any badge boosts that you have are applied again, giving another 12.5% boost in addition to the one that was already supposed to be there. So, as we begin the battle against Sabrina, we open by setting up Agility to badge boost our attack and special, and then Kadabra disables Double Kick. Then, after another Agility, Kadabra uses Psybeam, which gets a critical hit and also confuses us. And then it continues spamming Psybeam as we continue to hit ourselves in confusion over the next 2 turns to bring us down to red health. But then on the next turn we snap out of the confusion and use one final Agility. And now our buffed up special allows us to survive the Kadabra's Psychic on just 6 HP, and then we sweep the entire team with Thunderbolt, which really goes to show just how effective the badge boost strategy can be. Because ordinarily you want to use physical moves against Alakazam, since its massive special stat is over 3 times higher than its defense, but in this case, Thunderbolt's high base power, along with our badge boost and our same type attack bonus, was just enough to get the job done. Then up next, we head over to the Celadon Gym to face Erica. And yes, even though she's technically the 4th gym leader in the Kanto roster, the Kanto map is set up in such a way that you can actually face her as early as slot number 3 and as late as slot number 7. And in this run, we definitely wanted to delay this fight as late as possible because of her grass Pokemon's type resistance. But in any case, now that we're a full 18 points over leveled, I think we're finally ready to take her on without a problem. So to start, Erica opens with Victory Bell, who can definitely be a real nuisance because it knows both Poison Powder and Wrap, which is a deadly combo because Wrap is a multi-turn move, and you take poison damage every turn that Wrap is active. But in this case, after we go for Agility to set up our badge boost, it retaliates with Sleep Powder. Then while we're asleep, it uses Razor Leaf, which doesn't do much, then it misses with Wrap, then lands another Razor Leaf, during which time we wake up and resume our Agility setup. And you may notice as Victory Bell continues to use Razor Leaf, that Razor Leaf is dealing the same amount of damage every time, even in spite of our badge boost. And that's because Razor Leaf has an increased critical hit ratio, and critical hits bypass all stat modifications, including badge boosts. So then, after our setup is complete, we go for Thunderbolt, and as if only to demonstrate why we delayed Erica for so long, Victory Bell still survives in the red, and then retaliates with yet another Razor Leaf, after which we take it down in the next turn. Then that causes us to level up to 48, at which point we could learn Pin Missile, which I actually do consider because it's a bug move that's super effective against Psychic types, and 4 times effective against Grass and Poison types, but it has such a low base power that I decide against it. And by the way, isn't it a little strange that Jolteon can even learn Pin Missile? I mean, I get it, Jolteon looks like it's covered in pins and needles, so why shouldn't it be able to project them at its opponent? But it just feels out of place for an electric dog to learn a bug move. But anyway, Erica's next Pokemon Tangela has such low special that it goes down in one hit, even in spite of the type resistance, and then Vileplume is 2-shot with it just using a Poison Powder, winning us the Rainbow Badge. And finally, now that we've earned 7 of the 8 gym badges, there's nowhere else to go but to face Giovanni. And would you believe it? It turns out that Giovanni is actually the most difficult gym leader of this this run, because although we can set up Reflect to bolster our defense, and then set up Agility to badge boost our defense even further, meaning that the opening Rhyhorn's attacks do almost nothing, and allowing us to make it past Rhyhorn and Dugtrio in painless fashion, the fact that we've since gotten rid of our Body Slam means that we're relegated to using Double Kick against Nidoqueen and Nidoking, which they resist. So because of that, it takes a full 7 attacks to knock out the Nidoqueen, 8 if you count that in one turn we were trapped in paralysis from Nidoqueen's Body Slam, allowing Nidoqueen to slowly chip us down to yellow health going into Nidoking. And against Nidoking, Jolteon's and Nidoking's health stay neck and neck as they both chip each other down to red, and although Nidoking does use Thrash and then become confused as a result, on the last turn that we would have knocked out the Nidoking, we get trapped in paralysis and Nidoking spites its confusion to knock us out with a critical hit tackle. Then the next battle goes even worse, because although we again make it past the Rhyhorn no problem, Double Kick leaves Dugtrio hanging on in the red, after which it brings us down to yellow health with a super effective dig. Well, it's a good thing we taught Reflect, because that definitely would have gotten the knockout otherwise. Then against Nidoqueen, on the last turn before going down, it gets off a devastating critical hit Body Slam to bypass both our Reflect and our badge boost to bring us down to only 5 hit points, after which Nidoking obviously finishes us off. Then, in attempts number 3 and 4, Dugtrio uses Dig, which knocks us out with a critical hit. Then, in attempt number 5, Dugtrio doesn't crit this time, so it doesn't knock us out, but it still gets us to about 2/3 health going into Nidoqueen. And here it was at this point that I thought it might be time to use some rare candies to make this battle a little easier, but then luckily in this particular fight, we managed to brace the onslaught from Nidoqueen and Nidoking just enough to survive at only 4 hit points going into Rhydon. And now that we've made it to Rhydon, we functionally won, because Rhydon's AI that prioritizes super effective moves will cause it to spam Fissure. But it turns out that Fissure can't hit a Pokemon that outspeeds, and in this case Jolteon is so blisteringly fast that we still outspeed even in spite of the paralysis. So all we have to do is spam Double Kick until Rhydon goes down, winning us the Earth Badge. And after finishing that battle, I did contemplate if it was the right decision to get rid of Body Slam, because although replacing Thunderbolt is out of the question, it's entirely possible that Body Slam would be more useful than one of our other 3 moves in the form of Reflect, Agility, or Double Kick. But the problem is that Double Kick is useful for getting past the rock types of Giovanni and Bruno, Reflect is useful for bracing against Lance's Hyper Beam, and Agility is useful for getting past the Pokemon that resist Thunderbolt, such as Lance's Dragonairs and the champion's Exeggutor. But we've made our decision and it's too late to turn back now. So, endowed with our ultimate moveset, we head to face the last trainer prior to the Elite Four, Rival 6. And fortunately, this battle is really just a recapitulation of the previous rival battle, because we outspeed and one-shot Pidgeot with Thunderbolt, then set up Reflect and Agility against Rhyhorn just like we did against Giovanni, then 2-shot Rhyhorn with Double Kick, then 2-shot Execute, and 1-shot Gyarados. Then, unlike Sabrina's Alakazam, this Alakazam manages to survive Thunderbolt in spite of our badge boosts, but then it just goes for Reflect, after which the next Thunderbolt knocks it out. And finally Charizard stands no chance, meaning we defeat the rival on our first attempt and move on to the Elite Four. And as you know, first up on the Elite Four roster is Lorelei. And although Lorelei can be a real showstopper for so many Pokemon, for Jolteon this battle is just another day in the office, because her entire team is weak to Thunderbolt except Jinx, so all we have to do is use Dugong to set up our badge boost with Agility, during which time Dugong spams Growl to badge boost us even further, after which Lorelei's entire team is outsped in one shot. And I have to say, after running so many Pokemon that get brick-walled at Lorelei, although I appreciate a good challenge, sometimes it can be very refreshing to get through an Elite Four battle where the script for the entire fight is all of one sentence. But it's not time to celebrate yet, because now we move on to Bruno, who, not since our Electrode run, is actually a greater threat than Lorelei, because he opens with Onix, and with Onix's massive defense and Jolteon's lackluster attack, it's going to take quite a few turns to take this thing down. So, as usual, we open with our Reflect and Agility setup, during which Onix uses X Defend, followed by 2 Rock Throws into Harden. Then, after the setup is complete, it's time to spam Double Kick. And here, it's in this particular fight that demonstrates what I was talking about earlier regarding Body Slam, because if we were relegated to Body Slam instead of Double Kick, Body Slam's mere 15 power points wouldn't have been enough to take out this Onix, let alone the next one. And if we had gotten rid of Reflect or Agility, Onix would have been far more threatening than it was here, because in this case, it only gets us to around 2/3 health before going down, whereas it would have dealt far more damage otherwise, potentially even knocking us out. So in hindsight, I still think our current moveset without Body Slam was the right choice. And now because of our badge boosts, Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee are both one-shot with Thunderbolt, then because the next Onix doesn't have the chance to buff up its defense like the previous one did, it's only a 3-shot with Double Kick, after which Thunderbolt leaves Machamp hanging on the red, but then Machamp just goes for a useless Fissure before going down in the next turn, meaning we can now move on to Agatha. And in this fight, the strategy here is actually somewhat of a catch-22, because the dilemma is either to set up Agility and then spam Thunderbolt, which makes the Thunderbolts far more potent, but also gives Agatha far more opportunity to disrupt our setup with Sleeping Confusion, or just spam Thunderbolt from the onset without setting up first. Well, in this first attempt I opted for the former, and here Agatha sets out to demonstrate exactly what I just explained, because after our initial agility, her opening Gengar wastes no time putting us to sleep and then hitting us with Nightshade. Then, while we're still asleep, she switches out to Golbat, who confuses us with Confuse Ray, followed by a Supersonic for good measure, and then a Wing Attack. Then, although we wake up and do manage to complete our agility setup, as soon as we go for Thunderbolt, we instead hit ourselves in confusion not once, not twice, but 3 times. After which Agatha demonstrates yet another reason that setting up your stat buffs in this fight is so precarious, which is that Golbat can use Haze, which eliminates all stat modifications, thus causing the entire setup to go completely to waste. Then, although we do use Thunderbolt on the next turn to get the knockout, as soon as we initiate the agility setup again, Gengar promptly knocks us out with Nightshade. So, because of that loss, I immediately decide to feed Jolteon our 7 remaining rare candies to bring us to level 62 and try the fight again. Well, this time the battle goes much smoother, because although the opening Gengar does put us to sleep during the agility setup and get off a Nightshade, we wake up right away and resume the setup, and Agatha switches out to Golbat, who just uses a failed Supersonic before going down to Thunderbolt. And now that we've successfully dodged Golbat's Haze, the rest of the fight is much more certain, because Gengar is 2-shot even in spite of a Super Potion, then Haunter and Arbok are both 1-shot, then the second Gengar is 2-shot for the win. And in this upcoming battle against Lance, we're in somewhat of an awkward position, because one of the many quirks of Gen 1 is that badge boosts are eliminated if you level up mid-battle, and Agatha just now gave us just enough experience that Lance's opening Gyarados will level us up, meaning that it will not be profitable to set up our badge boosts at the beginning of the fight, and if we do want to set up our badge boosts, we'll have to do so against the second Pokemon in the lineup rather than the first. Fortunately though, Gyarados' 4 times weakness to Thunderbolt makes it a complete triviality for Jolteon, meaning that against Dragonair we can open with Reflect, after which Dragonair uses Agility. Then in the next turn, Jolteon is so fast that we still outspeed even in spite of Dragonair's Agility, and we go for an Agility of our own, after which Dragonair uses Hyper Beam, which does very little thanks to our Reflect, and 1 single badge boost so far. Then we complete our Agility setup and then attack with Thunderbolt, which doesn't quite get the knockout because of Dragonair's type resistance. Then Dragonair goes for Hyper Beam, which misses but wouldn't have dealt very much damage even if it landed, then goes down in the next turn. Then against the second Dragonair, Thunderbolt again doesn't quite knock it out, but it does paralyze, after which Lance uses a Hyper Potion to heal Dragonair back to full. Then 2 more Thunderbolts get the knockout, with Dragonair failing to attack due to paralysis. Then we easily dispatch a Aerodactyl thanks to our type advantage, and then, although Dragonite is neutrally affected by electric attacks, its special is still strong enough that it survives the first Thunderbolt, and then, just like the previous Dragonair, it becomes paralyzed and then heals with a Hyper Potion, then goes down to 2 more Thunderbolts. So now that we've defeated Lance, all that stands between us and the Hall of Fame is the champion. And in this battle, we're in the exact same position as we were against Lance, in the sense that the champion's Pidgeot will level us up, meaning that we'll have to set up our badge boost against Alakazam instead. So to kick off the battle, we first set up Reflect to prepare for the eventual Rhydon and Exeggutor, after which Pidgeot begins glowing in preparation for Sky Attack. But of course it never gets a chance to land Sky Attack because Thunderbolt promptly takes it out. And then, as I just mentioned, we use Alakazam for our agility setup, during which Alakazam attacks with a Psybeam that Jolteon tanks like it's nothing, partly due to Jolteon's excellent special, and partly because we had 1 badge boost set up already anyway. Then in the next 2 turns of our setup, Alakazam just uses a full health recover and a reflect, and then Alakazam's special is so good that even after our 3 badge boosts, Thunderbolt still isn't quite a one-shot, but it doesn't even matter because Alakazam just uses another reflect before going down in the next turn. Then up next, Rhydon's defense is so great and Jolteon's attack is so poor that Double Kick is a 3-shot despite being super effective, but in the meantime Rhydon just goes for a useless Horn Drill, followed by a Leer to lower our defense but also badge boost all our other stats even further. Then Exeggutor has a type resistance against both Thunderbolt and Double Kick, so naturally we just go with the more powerful move in the form of Thunderbolt, which ends up being a 3-shot while Exeggutor luckily chooses not to use Hypnosis and instead does very little damage with a Stomp and a Barrage. And now the battle is essentially over because the Gyarados and the Charizard don't stand a chance against Thunderbolt, meaning that in decisive fashion we've become champion of the Pokemon League. Results: Jolteon completed the game in 4 hours and 9 minutes game time, 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 20 seconds real time. Conclusion: this Jolteon run reminded me very much of my Electrode run, in the sense that both Jolteon and Electrode are extremely fast electric types with access to Thunderbolt, with excellent special but worse attack and defense, and access to Reflect to mitigate their poor defense. One key difference between the two runs, however, are that Electrode began with Sonic Boom, which allowed it to get past Brock in blistering pace, but also slowed it down in the early game prior to obtaining Thunderbolt, whereas Jolteon began with Thunder Shock, which didn't help at all against Brock, but was also a much more effective attack for everything in between Brock and Lieutenant Surge. And another key difference was that Jolteon's method of handling the various rock and ground type Pokemon was Double Kick, whereas Electrode had to rely on Toxic. So, given Jolteon's massive speed and special, coupled with a reliable same-type attack bonus move in the form of Thunderbolt that it used to sweep through almost every Pokemon in the game, in spite of it hitting a couple snags in the form of Brock and Giovanni, both of whom have teams that are immune to Jolteon's electric-type attacks, that unsurprisingly places Jolteon comfortably in the A tier for Pokemon solo challenges in Gen 1, just above Electrode, and just below Hitmonlee. Thank you all for joining along with me on this adventure together as we beat the game with just a Jolteon. I hope you enjoyed this video that was on the shorter side this time around, and as usual, if you like what I do and want to help me continue to provide you with quality Pokemon content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another installment. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by becoming a patron on Patreon. See you next time, everyone. Take care. Alright, Mewtwo, show me what you got. Probably just go with Agility, right? Psychic. Barrier's fine. And Recover, okay. Hey, look at that. First attempt at Mewtwo. Awesome.